So picture this, right? You have some stems to mix, maybe they're yours or someone sent you files. You start your session prep, do your basic EQ moves to the track, clear out the low end, add some 200 Hz to the snare, 8K on the vocals, and you go to grab a compressor plugin, but you have so many options at your disposal, you've lost sight of what kind of compressor to use on which source. What this causes is one of two things. One, a lack of creativity because you default to the same thing you've used the last time or have seen other people use. Or two, you grab the completely wrong type of compressor for the job. One can leave you uninspired and stagnant, and two can be a recipe for ruining your mix. But this is just one simple scenario, and by the end of this video, you will know which 6 compression mistakes you are making that will ruin your mix. So what's happening, fam? Miami here with JST, and it took tons of trial and error for me to stop making these mistakes in the box and in the hardware world. Take a look at the front of my desk. Distressors, 1176 Blue Stripe, LA2A clone, a bus comp, and even the talkback compressor in the SSL Fusion. A lot of you see analog goodness. I see 6 ways to make a permanent mistake during tracking. But how can you make a mistake compressing if it's an artistic choice? It's pretty simple, and this goes for hardware and software. Coming in at number 1. Overcompressing. So when you overcompress source material, a multitude of things can happen. If you're overcompressing your vocals, it will cause unpleasant sibilance. Nothing is worse than hearing all those S's popping up in a vocal bus. So say someone says something like, "FETs are super special compressors." Let's go all buttons in. You see how annoying that is? Big example of an overcompressed vocal right there. Now let's think about overheads. Overcompressing them can bring out way too much of the snare into the drum mix and can cause cymbals to be even more shrill than they already are. Man, I hate mixing cymbals. It's an easy way to kill a bass performance as well because it can compress the notes together so much that they don't even feel human anymore. And that can be cool in metal tracks sometimes, but not so much when you're looking for expressiveness. And I want to express my gratitude to everyone that hit that subscribe button and give some attitude to everybody that didn't. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, and if that seamless transition didn't ring a bell, I hope you do. Still got it. Transition game still crazy. What, you didn't like that one? I don't need your input, but you do. Number 2, gain staging. Make sure your input and output are set appropriately. Pay attention to how hard your compressors are hitting. This goes for analog and software alike. There tends to be a sweet spot that compressors like to sit at, so just make sure when you pop that preset open that you're hitting the sweet spot, like 3 dB on the Waves SSL E channel or the quite obvious marker on Howard Benson vocals.
Door lies to yourself, always slept through the floorboards. I was the match that lit your torch.
Number 3, knowing which type of compressors to use on different sources. I'm going to give you the quickest rundown of this possible. Write this down as a little guide. Opto, FET, tube, and VCA. Opto is the smoothest and is best for vocals, bass, and guitars. It has no attack and release, so not the best for transient-rich sources like drum shells. Tube compressors are best on the same things but have more color, vocals, bass, and guitars, but are popular for buses because they introduce attack and release times. VCA compressors are best on drums, but because they have threshold, attack, release, ratio, and occasionally knee, they can be used on anything. They don't add distortion like the next and final compressor, which makes them also good on a bus. Last compressor is the FET. It adds harmonic distortion, and even at its slowest, it is faster than tubes and opto compressors. Great for transient-rich info like drum shells, bass, and snappy vocals. If you'd like a full breakdown of these compressors, please check out my video, The 4 Types of EQ Explained. But this is a big deal because imagine not knowing this information and just reaching for a compressor. Now you know if you have a slower song, you can reach for slower and smoother compression. If it's faster and transient rich, you go for VCA and FET vibes. With this info, you can attack your next mix the right way. Number 4. Properly setting release and attack times. The attack and release determine the ebb and flow of your material. Depending on the way you set your attack time, it will affect the transient of your source differently. Pay excruciating detail to the difference this makes when using on a snare drum versus a vocal track.
All the vampires walking through the valley. Move west down Ventura Boulevard, and all the bad boys are standing in the shadows, and all the good girls are home with broken hearts. Vampires walking through the valley. Move west down Ventura Boulevard, and all the bad boys are standing in the shadows, and all the good girls are home with broken hearts.
The faster your attack is, the more aggressive the source is going to sound. And when using release times, remember that setting them slower leads to a more natural type of compression. This is what people refer to when they mean musical compression. But now that you know this, feel free to break some of the rules with the settings. They all serve their place and one does not replace the other, bringing us to number 5. Thinking it's a replacement for automation. Yes, leveling out your vocal by means of compression is wonderful because you don't have peaks coming through all over your mix, but this doesn't mean that you shouldn't manually automate. Automating and fader riding is becoming a lost art, especially in heavier music, because the thought process is that if every bus is squashed to all hell, there's no reason to do those tiny automation moves. But automation makes a big difference in capturing the nuances of a vocal take. It can be easy to become comfortable with skipping this step, but it's often the difference between a semi-pro mix and a pro one. Number 6. Putting a compressor in the proper place in a chain. Would you put a compressor at the end of your chain if it wasn't a bus comp? Does it make your reverb and delays go wild? Or maybe you put it first in the chain because you want to hear the vocal up front before you dig in? One of the big secrets of the A-list mixers and producers is putting the compressor after the EQ. The reason is that if you EQ something first, especially additive EQ, you're boosting frequencies, and by adding compression after that, you are smoothing out the changes you made. When you do this in reverse, you're bringing a source to the front, but possibly adding a boost of frequencies that no longer sounds musical.
It's a long day living in Reseda. There's a freeway running through the yard, and I'm a long day living in Reseda. There's a freeway running through the yard.
Howard Benson was really adamant about people knowing the difference, which is why there's a button for it in Howard Benson vocals to help people see how much of a difference it makes by putting the EQ in front of the compressor. So let's go over the 6 compression mistakes that can be ruining your mix. Overcompressing, gain staging, knowing which types of compressors to use on different sources, properly setting release and attack times, thinking it's a replacement for automation, and putting a compressor in the proper place in a chain. I hope you all enjoyed my explanation of these steps. With a combination of knowledge from all of these, you can avoid making any mistakes that will ruin your mix. It's a hard thing to master, just like EQ. But once it's under your belt and you understand the right type of compressor to grab and how to set it, you can be more experimental with how you use them. If you're an engineer on the come up, give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, you only have to do it one time, and tap that bell for notifications so when a video drops, you know the location. Until next time, I am out of here. Mic drop. Oh, I did it. With the Rode NT3, we saw what happened last time, and I did it anyways. Later.